Hi, I'm Tammy Nasuti, registered dietitian with Norwest Co-op Community Health Center, and we're here today with Paula at the grocery store to go on our grocery store tour. So Paula, we've talked about the tips to do before going grocery shopping, planning ahead, making a list. So are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, and before we do, did you have that snack? Because remember we said don't go shopping hungry.
I did. I had a snack.
Okay, great. So let's get going.
Right.
So we're starting our grocery store tour on the outside aisles or the perimeter of the grocery store. This is a great place to start because a lot of the foods you find on these outside aisles are naturally lower in sodium, fat, and sugar. So we're going to start off in the produce section, or what other people might call the vegetables and fruits department. This is a great place to start because vegetables and fruits are a powerhouse of vitamins and minerals, and they're also a great source of fiber. These vegetables and fruits are also naturally low in sodium, added sugars, and fat. So Paula, when it comes to choosing vegetables and fruits, it's great to look for a variety of color. We want to choose different colors, vegetables and fruits to eat daily to get the wide assortment of vitamins and minerals they provide. And actually, Canada's Food Guide recommends that we choose one orange vegetable and one dark green vegetable a day.
Oh, neat. And so, orange, like an example of an orange would be carrots, and then
carrots, something maybe like a sweet potato, maybe a pumpkin. Maybe what would you consider a dark green vegetable?
broccoli.
Broccoli, yeah. So broccoli's a great choice. Other green vegetables would be things like asparagus, spinach, even romaine lettuce counts as a dark green vegetable to have every day.
Okay.
And Canada's Food Guide recommends having this dark green and orange vegetable daily because of the nutrients they provide, specifically folate, or some people know it as folic acid, and vitamin A. And another interesting fact is, if it's hard to always get orange vegetables, you can substitute orange vegetables for certain orange fruits, such as cantaloupe, papaya, or mango, because they still provide that vitamin A you'd find in its vegetable counterpart.
Okay. And so what happens if I can't afford some of the fresh green vegetables or the different colors that I'm looking for?
Right, that's a great question. A lot of people struggle with budget, and sometimes fresh fruits and vegetables can be pretty expensive. So one great tip would be to buy fresh fruits and vegetables in season. Depending where you live, certain fruits and vegetables are available at certain times, and at other times of the year they're not available, which makes it more costly for us to buy. So if you can't buy in season, a great thing would be to buy canned vegetables or fruits, or frozen vegetables and fruits.
Perfect.
There's a couple things to look for though. So when you're purchasing some canned fruits, there's a few things you want to look for on the label. So if we look here, we can see that this one is packed in light syrup. There's also ones packed in fruit juice, and one's packed in water. So your best choice would be to choose the one packed in water or in fruit juice versus the light syrup. The ones packed in light syrup have a bit more added sugar.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then when it comes to frozen vegetables, we want to choose plain frozen vegetables, ones that aren't in a butter sauce or a cheese sauce already. That's going to lead to added sodium and added fat. So just choosing a plain vegetable with nothing on, and you could add your own seasoning at home. And then when it comes to canned vegetables, we want to make sure we're looking for ones that have no salt. So you can see this says salt-free peas. So this would be a great choice. If you can't find the vegetable that you want in a can in the salt-free variety, you can just buy a regular kind, and what you can do is drain it under the sink and wash away some of the sodium. So open, drain, and rinse it off.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Another thing to help with budget is there's certain vegetables, such as root vegetables, that are pretty cheap all year round. So root vegetables would entail things like potatoes, parsnips, carrots, and these are also great vegetables to roast along with your chicken, because remember how we talked about roasting a chicken for the week? Yeah, so those would be great sources to include as well. Okay. And one other thing to mention is fruit juice. So A lot of people want to include juice daily in their diet, and it's not something that we need to drink a lot of. So if you are choosing to include fruit juice into your diet, we want to limit it to about a half of a cup a day, and we want to check to make sure that we have something that says 100% fruit juice versus a fruit beverage or punch, which would have added sugar in it.
Perfect.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
So that's kind of our produce section. So why don't we continue on the outside of the store and move to the next department?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So to get started, I think we'll start with this bread here. This bread is saying it's 100% whole wheat. So when it comes to bread, the best choice would be to pick a product that actually is whole grain. So there is a difference. There's whole grain, there's whole wheat, and then there's our white bread, which we might also call, you might see it being made with enriched flour. Okay? So whole grain is actually going to be our best choice, and that's because when you take a wheat grain and make it into flour, there is 3 parts it starts with. When you make whole grain, you've used all 3 parts or the whole wheat grain. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, when you use something called whole wheat bread, what they've done is only use 2 parts of that grain. They've thrown 1 part away. Okay, and then when we make a white bread, what they've done is only keep 1 part of the grain and thrown the other 2 parts away. Okay, so whole grains are best option because you're keeping all parts. You're keeping the part that has the fiber, you're keeping the part that has the healthy fats, and a lot of the vitamins and minerals. So how do you know if you're choosing a whole grain bread product? There's a couple things you can do. You can look at the label and see, does it say 100% whole grain? This one says it's 100% whole wheat, so I'm not sure just by looking at this if it's a whole grain. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to flip it over, and what we want to do is go to our ingredients, and we want to read that. So what we're going to do, we're going to check the ingredients where it just is on this side here, and we're going to see what does it say. What we want it to say would be whole grain, whole wheat flour. Okay, so let's take a look. What is that first ingredient?
Whole grain, whole wheat flour.
And it says including the germ. The germ is that one part that usually gets tossed out when we make whole wheat or white bread. So this is letting us know that it's also kept that 3rd part. So whole grain is your best option, and it's also a great option because it's the bread that's going to provide us with some fiber. So what we want to do is see how much fiber is in the bread that we're going to be eating. So to do that, the first thing you're going to want to do when you look at a bread package is check the food label, and you want to see how much bread it's talking about, or what we call a serving size. So if you look at this, what is the serving size that it's telling us?
It says per 2 slices.
Right, per 2 slices. So that's something you want to check, right? Because sometimes you might pick up a loaf of bread and it might say for 1 slice, or it might say for 2 slices. So you need to compare it to what you're actually eating. If you were only going to have 1 slice of bread, you'd have to do the math to see what you're actually getting. So what you could do is divide the numbers in half. If you were having double the serving size on the label, you would have to double the numbers.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So for 2 slices of bread, what we're going to do is look down here, and we're going to see how much fiber this bread contains for 2 slices. So if you look at that fiber,
It says 4
grams. Perfect. So that is actually a great source of fiber. When it comes to bread products, we want to try to choose a product that has 2 grams of fiber per slice or more. So this one is 4. That means each slice has 2 grams of fiber. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so whole grain, that's your best option. If you can't, whole grain bread's gonna be a little bit more expensive, so if you can't find a whole grain bread that fits into your budget, another option could be, instead of whole grain, to go for something that is 100% whole wheat. So now this one says 100% whole wheat, just like that one. But I don't know for sure, is this a whole grain? Because it didn't say 100% whole grain. So what are we gonna do?
Flip it over.
And check the ingredients. So if we look here, what is the first ingredient on this one? I'll put it to the other side, sorry. What is the first ingredient?
Whole wheat flour.
Whole wheat flour. So it's not whole grain, it's just whole wheat. So this is telling me that they've got rid of that one part, that germ. Remember how they said including the germ? Now this one does not have the germ. So this, it means it's using 2 of the 3 parts of the grain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we've lost a little bit of nutrition getting rid of that one part.
Right.
Now, if we look at this, what's the serving size for this one?
Per 2 slices.
For 2 slices, perfect. And if we're having 2 slices of this whole wheat bread, how many grams of fiber are you getting?
Only 1.
So this one only gives us 1 gram of fiber for 2 slices. So this does not have that ideal 2 grams or more per slice, like our whole grain one did.
Right.
Okay, but this is still an okay option if your budget doesn't allow you to get the whole grain. Okay, and this is still a better option than white bread. Yeah. So a lot of times the white bread, if you look, it's just not going to be a whole grain. It's not going to be whole wheat. It's just going to use that one part of the grain. And if we look at the ingredients, what's the first ingredient?
Enriched wheat flour.
Yeah, so if you see that word enriched or all-purpose might be something, that just means it's a fancy word for white flour. So basically, there's going to be no fiber in this one. Okay, so again, for 2 slices, it's going to be very low, going to have no fiber in it. So this would be our least favorite choice.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not saying you can never have white bread again, but what we want to do, Canada's Food Guide actually recommends us to have half of our grain products being whole grains each day. So it doesn't mean every grain product you choose has to be a whole grain, but to try to include those a few times per day. Does that make sense? Any questions about the bread?
No, it makes total sense.
Okay, perfect. And one other thing to look at when you're choosing a bread product or grain product would be to check the label and see how much sodium is in it, another word for salt, and how much fat is in it, because they can actually hide a lot of salt and fat into some of the bread products that we can buy. So after we look at the serving size and we've checked out the fiber, another thing we can look at is how much fat is in it and how much sodium is in it. So there's a general rule of thumb we can follow. If we see 5% or less down the side here where the percents are next to a nutrient, 5% or less means there's a little of a nutrient. If you see 15% or more, that means there's a lot of a nutrient. So we'd like to see those lower numbers at 5% or less for things that we don't need a lot of. So that would be something like sodium or fat, saturated fat, trans fat. And we'd like to see that 15% or more in products that are in nutrients that are good for us. So things like fiber, vitamins, and minerals. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if we look at this bread, if we check out the fat, what is the percent daily value for the total fat?
2%.
2%. So is that a little of a nutrient or a lot of a nutrient?
A little.
It is a little, so that would be a good choice for fat. The other thing would be the sodium. So the sodium, what percent daily value is the sodium?
10%.
10%. So that is a bit higher than that 5% or a little, right? So what we could do is we could always compare this white bread, if we were going to buy a white bread, to another white bread and choose the one that for 2 slices has the lower number for sodium. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, perfect. And when it comes to other grain products like cereals or crackers or pasta, we want to do the same thing. We want to see how much fiber is in it per serving, we want to see how much fat is in it per serving, and we want to see how much sugar or sodium is in it per serving. So I have a couple cereals that I picked out here just for us to practice comparing. So let's take a look. So for these guys, what's the first thing we want to do? We want to check the serving size, right? So we're going to see for how much of this cereal are we going to get this amount of nutrients. So the serving size here, what does that say?
It says per 3/4 cup.
Perfect. So what we're going to do is for every 3/4 of a cup of this cereal, let's see how much fat is in it.
1.5 grams of fat.
Or
2%.
2%. So is that a little fat?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay, so that concludes our time in the bakery department. So let's move on to our next section.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So we're continuing our grocery store tour here in the meat department. So we're going to talk about choosing meats and what to look for when choosing a meat. So one of the first things you want to do is to try to choose lean meats. Choosing a lean meat means you'll be getting less fat, which is something we don't eat a lot of throughout the day. So if you're picking out a meat, it's good to look for a meat that doesn't have a whole lot of fat or this marbling. However, if this is a type of meat you commonly eat, by all means buy it, but what I want you to do is trim the fat off before you eat it. You can cook with the fat on and trim it off, or you can trim the fat off before you cook it, but just want you to avoid eating the actual fat and the marbling. Another thing you can do is when you're buying things like a ground meat, there's many different options. You can find regular ground beef, a lean ground beef, or even an extra lean ground beef, or a lean pork versus a regular pork. And choosing the leaner options just means that you're going to be getting less fat when you cook it. However, sometimes these lean meats and the regular extra lean meats are more expensive than the regular ones. So what you can do is still buy a regular meat And then just make sure that when you're cooking it up, drain off the fat. Don't eat the fat, drain it off. Sometimes too, you can buy extra lean and regular and mix them together, and then you're still getting less fat, but still drain that off as well. Another thing is when it comes to things like chicken, for example. One thing you could do, you could take a whole chicken and you can roast this up yourself and add your own seasoning, so you're using less fat, less salt by flavoring and cooking it yourself. And to make it even leaner, after you cook it, trim off the skin and don't eat the skin. Cooking a whole chicken is a great way to save some money. It can stretch. You can break it down to use it for sandwiches, for salads. You can put it in soup, so it's a quick, easy thing. So you did mention your family liked roasted chicken, so this would be a perfect treat. Maybe on a Sunday, cook it up, and you can use it throughout the week, and just trimming off the skin, and it's naturally lower in fat.
Perfect.
So another way to help stretch the budget when it comes to buying meat, or if you're someone who doesn't like a lot of meat, a great alternative is choosing something like a canned or dried bean or lentil. These guys will also provide us with protein and some iron, but they'll also give us something called fiber, which we don't find in meat either. So this is a great way to stretch the budget. You can mix it in with meat and use less meat, do half beans, half meat, or you can just replace this altogether with meat, and it'll stretch your dollar a lot further. So when it comes to choosing dairy products, one thing we want to look for is the fat. So every dairy product, milk, cheese, yogurt, is going to have something called the percent milk fat on it, or it'll be listed as percent MF, like you can see right here. So Canada's Food Guide actually recommends that when it comes to dairy products, we choose a lower fat dairy product. So something like a 0%, a 1%, or a 2% would be our best choices. Okay, so when we're buying our milk, we would want to choose a 2%, a 1%, or a 2% milk. And when it comes to yogurt, we can do the same thing, 0, 1, or 2%. There are a lot of yogurts out there that are actually very high in fat. So I have an example here. This one, it's 5% milk fat. So if I'm telling you we want to choose 2% or less, this one's a little bit high. So yeah, when choosing yogurt, look at the fat, choose a lower fat percentage. And the other thing you want to check is the sugar content, because a lot of the flavored yogurts will have a lot of added sugar. So something like a plain yogurt will be your best choice. We know it's going to have no added sugar. There's going to be some natural sugars in here, which is completely fine, but we know that it's lower and has no added sugar. Then we want to watch these flavored yogurts. So if we take a look for a serving of this flavored yogurt, which would be 3/4 of a cup, how many grams of sugar are in this?
19 grams.
19 for sure. So now that's a little bit high, right? Mm-hmm. Usually there'll be a natural sugar in yogurt. That might account for 7 to 12 grams, and any extra grams of sugar, that means it's been added. So if we look at our plain, and this is for a half of a cup, so just a little bit less, but this one only has how many grams of sugar?
4 grams.
4 grams versus 19. So looking at sugar, this would be a much better option because this has a lot of added sugar. Another thing you can look for with yogurt is to get a good amount of protein. So if you want, instead of a plain yogurt or a flavored yogurt, you could go for something like a Greek yogurt, which actually has double the protein than you would find in a regular yogurt. A regular yogurt might have about 9 grams for 3/4 of a cup, where this will have something like 18 to 21 grams in it. So again, looking at this, the Greek, you'd want to go plain or lower sugar as well. We can use the percent milk fat trick for things like cheese as well. Cheese is commonly high in fat. It's usually 30%, it can be 40% milk fat. So what we want to do is look for a cheese that's lower in milk fat, something like 20% or less. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the key when choosing dairy products. Looking for percent milk fat, choosing a lower percent, and watching for the amount of sugar that's been added. And to also save some money, when you're buying yogurt, it's a good idea to try to buy in a tub, because you usually end up paying more for the individual packaging than you would for just one whole carton. So that concludes our grocery store tour. I'd like to thank Paula for coming on this tour with me.
No problem.
Thank you so much. So just to summarize a few key things that we talked about on our tour, choosing fresh fruits and vegetables daily, choosing one green and orange vegetable each day, reading that food label. When it comes to grains and bread products, looking for ones that contain fiber, lower fat, and lower sugar. When we're shopping for meats, choosing leaner cuts of meats, taking the skin off, trimming off the fat, using beans and lentils as an alternative to meat. When it comes to dairy, checking that percent milk fat and choosing a lower percent fat and looking for the sugar in things like yogurt and choosing lower sugar products. Now that we're done, we've got a cart full of healthy foods, so we should get home and get them in the fridge to keep everything cold and fresh.
Fantastic. Thank you.
You're welcome.